I want you to imagine a scenario for a second. Put yourself right in the middle of it.
Okay.
Imagine you are sitting in your living room on a random Tuesday evening. You're looking across the coffee table at your spouse.
Right. The person you've built your entire adult life with.
Exactly. And in that totally mundane moment, you realize with complete, undeniable, terrifying clarity that your marriage is essentially over. The love has flatlined.
The connection is just
Like,
gone. Yeah.
But instead of calling a lawyer or packing a bag or even having a dramatic screaming match that wakes up the neighbors, you do something entirely different.
It's much quieter.
Yes. You look over at your young kids playing on the rug and you make a silent, unilateral, secret pact with yourself. You decide, I'm going to wait 12 years.
12 years. Wow.
I'm going to endure this. I'm going to wait until the youngest child goes off to college. And then, and only then, when the house is empty, will I walk out the door.
It's an incredibly heavy premise to sit with. The sheer willpower required to make a decision like that, and then to wake up the next morning and just pour the coffee as if nothing has changed. It completely redefines what we think of when we hear the phrase marital endurance.
It really does. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in that exact scenario. We've got a fascinating stack of sources centered around a novel that explores this very premise. It's called The Rest of Our Lives by Ben Markovits.
A fantastic book.
And what we are going to do today is dissect the anatomy of what the main character calls a C-minus marriage. We are going to look at the modern midlife crisis, what it feels like to be culturally orphaned in a shifting America, and ultimately what it means to drift passively through your days versus actively making choices about the life you inhabit.
It is a profoundly moving narrative. And looking at the critical reception, I mean, it was shortlisted for the 2025 Booker Prize, so it's clear this story resonates on a massive scale. Because it's not a story about the fiery explosion of a breakup. We've all seen those stories.
Right, the dramatic movie versions.
Exactly. This is an autopsy of middle age. It's an exploration of the long, quiet, slow-motion decay of a relationship. It looks at the generational divides that tear families apart from the inside and the agonizing everyday compromises we make for the people we supposedly love.
Before we get into that heavy emotional lifting, though, there is a piece of context about the author Ben Markovits that absolutely colors the way this entire story breathes. Markovits is a former professional basketball player.
Which is such a unique background for a literary novelist.
Totally. He actually played over in Germany, and there's this incredible tidbit in our sources that he once played against a young Dirk Nowitzki.
Wow.
If you know anything about basketball, you know that's a serious pedigree, and you can absolutely feel that athletic DNA woven into this book. Basketball isn't just a background detail or a hobby for the characters, it's a vital subtext.
It really is. It's the lens through which the main character navigates the entire world.
How he attempts to bond with his son, how he evaluates other men, and crucially, how he faces the terrifying reality of his own aging body.
That physical history informs the pacing of the narrative perfectly. There's a distinct rhythm to how athletes perceive time and physical decline, and Markovits translates that onto the page so well. You really feel the protagonist's mindset, this constant awareness of the clock running down both on the court and in his own home.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the inciting incident, because you don't just wake up one day and decide to wait 12 years to leave your spouse without a catalyst. There was a spark that lit this very slow burning fuse, and it happened over a decade ago.
The affair.
The affair. Our narrator, Tom Layward, discovers that his wife, Amy, is having a fling with a man named Zach Zersky. And what really hooks me here isn't the affair itself, because affairs happen all the time in literature. It's the intensely specific, almost tragically ordinary nature of the guy she chooses.
Zach is such an interesting character study.
He isn't some suave, mysterious homewrecker who sweeps her off her feet in a whirlwind of passion. He's a guy from their synagogue. He's a few years younger than Amy, and he's basically a stay-at-home dad because his own wife is the primary breadwinner. She makes massive money as a head of oncology at a hospital.
The characterization of Zach is remarkably precise. Markovits gives us these visceral details that tell you everything you need to know about him. Like he wears these linen shirts that he leaves unbuttoned, just enough at the chest.
Specifically to reveal his graying chest hair.
Yes, exactly. He's the guy who on Sundays brings his guitar to Temple Beth and plays for the kids singing Spin, Spin, Sevavon.
He is the quintessential tree-planting, happy-clappy guy, the guy who dances with the elderly ladies and the little pigtailed girls at bar mitzvahs. But you realize he's doing it just so he has a socially acceptable excuse to put his arm around the pretty bored mothers without anyone complaining.
And Tom notices this.
He notices Zach touching Amy's hand under the fold-out table at a Purim food bank drive. It's so suburban. It's almost suffocatingly ordinary. But I really want to dig into why she did it. Tom suggests that they were both just bored. They had hit that plateau where their spouses made good money, they didn't have to scramble or fight for survival, and they were left with this restless, creeping depression.
I think we have to push back on the idea that it was just boredom, though. What's fascinating here is the psychological framing of her actions. When Amy finally confesses the affair to Tom,
Which, by the way, happens after it's already over.
right, and after Tom has already secretly known about it for a while, she admits that it didn't really mean anything. It wasn't a grand romance. She wasn't planning to run away with Zach. She was essentially lobbing a grenade into her own living room to see if Tom would dive on it.
She wanted a reaction.
She was looking for a reaction.
Yeah.
She explicitly tells him you don't feel anything about anything.
She is almost weaponizing her own guilt there.
Exactly. Amy has this highly developed, almost toxic sense of guilt, and she twists that guilt until it transforms into anger at the person she wronged. She resents Tom for not being angry enough, for not fighting for her, for just absorbing the blow like a sponge.
Tom actually draws a really dark parallel here. He compares her affair with Zach to a form of self-harm. He mentions that when Amy was a teenager before they ever met, she used to cut herself on the thigh. She would literally slice into her own skin just to feel something sharp, to break through a psychological numbness.
And Tom views this affair as the adult equivalent of that.
Exactly. It was a bid for attention, a way to slash at the perfectly manicured numbness of her upper-middle-class life. But Tom doesn't give her the reaction she wants. And this is where the entire psychological architecture of the book is established. Tom is relentlessly, almost unnervingly pragmatic. When she tells him he doesn't scream, he doesn't throw a lamp against the wall, he just sits there and asks a practical question. Do you want a divorce?
And she says no. Because the kids, the house, the social standing, that is the infrastructure of her life, she tells him that is all she has to show for the last 12 years of her existence.
So, denied the explosion she was perhaps subconsciously seeking, the dust just settles. And Tom makes that silent pact. He looks at their youngest daughter, Miri, and tells himself, when Miri goes to college, I can leave too. And he just locks that thought in a box and swallows the key for over a decade.
Which is wild.
It is. And that leads us to one of the most brilliant, painfully funny, and deeply accurate analogies I have ever encountered about long-term relationships. Tom compares the reality of marriage to being a fan of the New York Knicks.
It is a masterclass in using a hyper-specific cultural touchstone to explain a universal human feeling.
I need us to spend some time on this because if you are listening to this right now and you have been in any relationship for longer than 5 years, this is going to hit you right between the eyes. Break down this Knicks analogy for us. What does basketball fandom have to do with staying in a broken marriage?
It comes down to the concept of accumulating data. Tom argues that when you fall in love in your 20s, you don't really see the person standing in front of you. You see a projection of their potential. You see them bathed in flattering light, full of possibility. You think if they just tweak this one habit or if they get that one promotion, everything will be perfect.
But as you move through your 30s and into your 40s, you start gathering data.
Mountains and mountains of behavioral data about who this person actually is on a random Tuesday when the dishwasher's broken and the dog threw up.
You see how they argue, how they handle stress, how they treat service workers, how they deal with their parents.
Precisely. And eventually, after a decade or more, all that data forms an indisputably accurate picture. If at that point you continue to hold on to the illusion that they're going to fundamentally change to, Tom argues that is entirely your own fault.
The data is right there.
Staying married, in his view, requires accepting the data. You have to stop expecting miracles. You accept that this is the reality of the person you chose. And he compares this directly to being a Knicks fan. Year after year, the Knicks might draft a flashy new rookie or bring in a new coach, and the fans convince themselves this is the year they win the championship.
But the historical data suggests otherwise.
Exactly. Eventually, a true fan just accepts that the team is probably going to be mediocre, but you keep watching the games anyway because they are your team.
Yeah.
You trade the agonizing hope for a sort of comfortable, pragmatic resignation.
And so Tom and Amy settle into what he bluntly grades as a C- marriage, which is a devastating grade when you think about it. It's passing, but barely. It means you're doing just enough to not fail, but there's absolutely no joy or excellence in the endeavor. And Tom realizes that if your marriage is a C-, it makes it almost mathematically impossible to score higher than a B on the rest of your life. It drags your entire GPA down.
It really does.
But to truly understand why this marriage is stuck at a C-, we have to look beneath the affair. The affair was just a symptom. The underlying disease is the massive unbridgeable class and background friction between Tom and Amy. They are fundamentally at a cellular level from different worlds.
The class dynamics here are subtle but pervasive.
Uh,
Tom is thoroughly lower middle class in his origins. He was raised by a single mother in Trenton, New Jersey after his father simply walked out on them. He didn't have a safety net. He paid his own way through law school.
He views life as a series of harsh facts that must be dealt with practically.
Right, he is emotionally contained because in his background, getting overly emotional doesn't pay the rent.
And then you have Amy Naftali. She is wealthy, she is privileged, she attended the elite Brearley School for Girls in Manhattan. Markovits drops this detail that she even modeled for a luxury wristwatch company when she was in college.
She possesses that effortless old money elegance.
And the ultimate physical manifestation of her world, the crucible where Tom feels the most alienated, is her family's summer house in Wellfleet, up on Cape Cod.
The Wellfleet House is such a brilliant literary device. It represents the inheritance, both material and cultural, that Tom thought he wanted when he married into this family, but that he never truly learned how to inhabit. It's described in the text as having this utilitarian chic.
It is not flashy at all.
No, there are no marble countertops or stainless steel appliances. In fact, there are no cupboards in the kitchen at all. The pots and pans just hang from iron hooks on the wall. The floorboards are wide and they creak constantly.
It has old shaker furniture that probably cost a fortune but looks like it was salvaged from a barn. There are itchy wool blankets draped over the sofas and rusty gas canister heaters that you literally have to light with a match if it gets cold at night.
It is the very specific aesthetic of extreme wealth that doesn't feel the need to look shiny to prove it has value. They know they're rich, so they can afford to live like rustic pioneers on their vacations.
And there's this one detail that I think captures the whole dynamic. There is an authentic Max Ernst painting hanging on the wall.
The strange little Birdman painting.
Yes. A museum-quality piece of surrealist art by Max Ernst, just casually hanging in a drafty Cape Cod beach house, simply because Amy's father actually knew the artist back in the day. It's a casual flex of cultural superiority that Tom can never compete with.
He is always an outsider in that house.
Always. Amy's mother practically treats him like the hired help. Because Tom is a lawyer who actually has to work for a living, he can usually only come up to Wellfleet on the weekends. So Amy's mother forces Tom to sleep in this detached studio out in the yard on these old musty mattresses, rather than letting him sleep in the master bedroom with his own wife.
Just so he doesn't disturb the rhythm of the house when he arrives late on a Friday night.
Think about what that does to a man's ego over the course of 20 years. It creates a permanent, inescapable dynamic where Tom feels he is merely a guest visiting Amy's life, rather than a co-author of their shared existence. Every time he steps onto that property, he is reminded that he is a transplant from Trenton.
This friction dictates everything. It dictates how they spend money, how they raise their children, how they argue, and ultimately why their marriage feels like a lonely isolation chamber for both of them.
So for you listening right now, I want you to genuinely reflect on your own relationships or even your deep, long-term friendships. How much data do you accumulate about someone before you just throw your hands up and stop trying to change them? When do you transition from hoping for a miraculous transformation to just accepting the reality of the flawed human being sitting across from you?
And more importantly, is that acceptance a form of maturity? Or is it a form of giving up? It's a deeply sobering question.
It is. And for 12 long years, Tom and Amy just gathered that data. They smoothed things over. They hosted the dinner parties. They went to Wellfleet, all for the sake of the kids. But now as the novel opens, those 12 years are up. The timer has hit 0.
Which means we need to look at the catalyst for this present-day explosion. Miri's final summer before college.
We are thrust into this agonizing transition period of the empty nest. Miri is 18. She is heading off to Carnegie Mellon in the fall, and she is an absolutely fantastic, fully realized character.
Miri represents the independent spirit of the family. She is fiercely, unapologetically her own person, and that independence deeply frustrates her mother. Markovits draws a sharp contrast between Miri's childhood, when Amy could control her image, buying her matching dresses, taking her to elite ballet classes, and her current teenage reality.
Miri quit ballet years ago, not because she wasn't good at it, but because she couldn't stand the copycat precision of it. She hated having to move exactly like everyone else.
Later, she abruptly quits her highly successful travel soccer team just because nobody else she knew at school was trying out. She refuses to do things just for the resume.
And her aesthetic, her style is a direct rebellion against the Wellfleet vibe. She completely abandons the crisp keds and penny loafers that her mother loves. She starts aggressively thrifting, coming home, lugging these heavy black garbage bags full of clothes.
She wears oversized Eames jeans from the 90s, heavy Doc Martens.
Vintage shirts with actual holes in them, and this giant faded Mickey Mouse sweatshirt that is at least 2 sizes too big for her. She gets a nose ring, which Amy hates, especially because when Miri gets a cold, the ring gets red and infected and uncomfortable. She even dyes a bright pink streak into her hair to celebrate getting her acceptance letter to college.
Amy views Miri's aesthetic choices not as teenage exploration, but almost as a personal attack. Amy, who grew up modeling and valuing projection and status, sees Miri's as deliberately trying to make herself ugly. It offends Amy's sensibilities.
But Tom, on the other hand, secretly loves it. He looks at Miri and feels relief. He loves that Miri completely lacks the neuroses that constantly plague Amy. Tom views Miri as a kid who has figured out that the performative aspects of society are a scam, and she just refuses to play the game.
We really see this dynamic crystallize when we are introduced to Miri's boyfriend, Jim. Jim is the quintessential, terrifyingly perfect golden boy. He's heading off to Harvard in the fall. He spent his summer interning at Apple Park in Cupertino.
He wears crisp chinos and perfectly ironed collared shirts, and he even wears a tailored jacket and tie when he casually drops by the Layward house on a Sunday afternoon.
Jim is relentlessly ambitious, and his politeness is weaponized. Amy absolutely adores him. To Amy, Jim represents the structured, successful, high-status path she desperately wants for her daughter. He's the kind of boy you brag about to the other mothers of the synagogue.
But Miri finds him utterly suffocating. There is this incredibly telling scene that perfectly encapsulates why Jim is wrong for Miri, and it happens at a summer party at the Brinkmans' house. The Brinkmans have this beautiful property overlooking Slough Pond. Miri and Jim are down by the water, and they decide to take some of the little kids at the party out in these canoes.
Jim, being the alpha golden boy, starts subtly showing off. He's using too much torque with his paddle, trying to prove how strong and capable he is, and in the process, he actually tips the canoe completely over with a 9-year-old kid inside.
Now, objectively, it's not a dangerous situation. The water in Slough Pond is warm, the kid knows how to swim, they are in the shallows close to the shore. But it is a massive loss of face for Jim, and it sparks a tense, whispered fight on the beach between him and Miri.
Tom, watching from the deck, goes down to intervene and diffuses the situation by taking Miri for a walk in the woods.
And it's during this walk that Miri explains to her dad why she is breaking up with Jim. And her reasoning is so mature. She says he always has to win at everything. Even if it's not a competition for him, it's a competition. He thinks he can, win me. If we disagree about something, he just has to be more persuasive.
It's a brilliant articulation of a very specific type of toxic relationship. Jim is an objectively good partner on paper. He doesn't cheat, he's polite, he has a bright future, but he is fundamentally the wrong partner for Miri.
Jim wants Miri to accompany him to Harvard and have the full college experience, which in his mind means networking, joining the right clubs, maintaining the right aesthetic of success. Miri just wants to wear her oversized Mickey Mouse sweatshirt and be left alone to figure out who she is.
And the conflict this breakup causes between Miri and her mother is intense. Amy is terrified that Miri is giving up, that she is throwing away a golden ticket. This culminates in a deeply uncomfortable scene where the family is eating takeout Papagino's pizza.
Out of nowhere, under the guise of maternal advice, Amy brings up the freshman 15. She tells Miri she has to start watching what she eats, that she needs to project the kind of person she wants people to treat her as. Miri is just sitting there with a slice of pizza halfway to her mouth, completely horrified, asking, "Am I fat?"
And Tom has to jump in, play the referee, and say, "You look good to me."
It's agonizing to read because you see Amy projecting her own deep-seated anxieties about appearance, social standing, and failure directly onto her daughter. We've all been at a family dinner where a parent disguises their own neuroses as helpful advice, and it just poisons the air in the room.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of Tom's 12-year pact, the real tragedy here is that Miri is the load-bearing wall holding this family together.
Exactly. Tom admits in his internal monologue that for the past 6 years, Miri has basically been his best friend. During the pandemic, they sat on the couch and watched all 10 seasons of Friends together. They have their own inside jokes. Miri is the buffer between Tom and Amy.
Whenever the tension between husband and wife gets too high, Miri diffuses it. With her leaving for Carnegie Mellon, Tom and Amy are going to be left utterly alone in this echoey haunted house, forced to actually look at each other.
Which is why we also have to talk about the departure of their older son, Michael, because his dynamic provides the missing piece of the puzzle. Michael is 24 years old. He is living in Los Angeles working on a PhD in philosophy. Specifically, he is writing a dense, impenetrable dissertation on Immanuel Kant and John Rawls.
Okay, for those of us who didn't spend 7 years in a philosophy grad program, break that down.
Yeah.
Why did Markovits specifically choose Kant and Rawls for Michael's dissertation? What does that tell us about him?
It's an incredibly deliberate character choice. Immanuel Kant is famous for the categorical imperative, the idea that you must do your duty based on a universal moral law utterly devoid of personal emotion or inclination. You do the right thing because it is a rule, not because you feel love or empathy.
And John Rawls is famous for the veil of ignorance, the idea that justice requires stripping away all your personal biases and connections to evaluate a society fairly. Both of these philosophers deal in cold, sterile, duty-bound systems of ethics.
And that perfectly mirrors how Michael treats his family. Michael views contact with his parents as a categorical duty, not a source of joy. He flies back to New York for a few days, purely out of obligation to say goodbye to Miri before she goes to college.
He is the distant academic. He analyzes his family like they are subjects in a sociological study, and the parent-child dynamics are completely crossed here. While Tom is deeply connected to Miri, Amy is desperately attached to Michael.
When Michael was young, he was her little helper, the one who validated her. But now Michael keeps both of them at a freezing arm's length. He has built a completely separate life on the West Coast, which includes a romantic interest named Betty.
Betty is fascinating. She's an older ex-veterinarian, originally from Montana, and Michael tells his parents that he likes Betty because she has a hinterland.
A hinterland. It's such an evocative word to use for a person. It implies that she has unexplored depth, a vast landscape of past experiences and rugged history that Michael, who has spent his entire life inside the manicured bubbles of elite academia, finds slightly intimidating and deeply alluring.
It shows that Michael is trying to anchor himself to something real, something outside the world his parents built. But for Tom, watching Michael's emotional distance is terrifying because it's a preview of what he fears will happen with Miri when she leaves.
The empty nest isn't just about the physical house being quiet. It's about the sudden, deafening silence between you and your spouse when you no longer have the project of raising children to distract you from the fact that you have nothing left to say to each other.
And what makes this novel so rich is that Tom's personal domestic crisis coincides perfectly with a much larger cultural crisis. Markovits doesn't just isolate this family in a vacuum-sealed bubble. He places them squarely in the middle of a rapidly shifting American landscape.
Which brings us to a massive thematic pillar of this deep dive, the generational divide and the archetype of the angry white male. Now, we need to be clear, here we are just reporting on how the characters experience this cultural shift. We aren't taking sides on the politics.
Absolutely. We are looking at this purely through Tom's lens and how he feels culturally orphaned.
Markovits uses Tom to explore a very specific type of cultural alienation. We are going to look at how Tom views the world shifting beneath his feet and how that friction bleeds into his family life and his career.
It's crucial context for his character. Tom feels profoundly alienated, not just from his wife, but from his era. He is a man who played by the rules of the 90s and 2000s, and suddenly he feels like the ground rules of society have been completely rewritten while he wasn't looking.
A perfect, highly uncomfortable example of this happens back at that same Brinkman summer party. Tom is standing on the deck, nursing a drink, talking to an economics teacher named Jeffrey. Jeffrey is telling a story about one of his high school students. This student is non-binary, sometimes presenting as a she and sometimes as a he, wearing a short pleated skirt one day and baggy skater jeans the next.
And Jeffrey, the teacher, is actually quite sympathetic in his telling. He tells Tom that he's honestly a bit jealous of how free this kid seems, how unburdened they are from the rigid gender hang-ups that their generation grew up with.
But Tom, trying to relate but failing spectacularly, interjects with a term that reveals exactly how out of touch he is. He says, for which we used to have a very good word which nobody uses anymore, transvestite.
And Miri, who happens to be standing right there listening to this exchange, instantly rolls her eyes, physically groans, and says, "Come on, Dad."
The conversation then pivots, and Jeffrey mentions that his university administration has asked all the faculty to add their preferred pronouns to their email signatures. Jeffrey refuses, but he makes this very nerdy grammar joke. He says he refuses because he doesn't like being referred to in the accusative case, meaning he doesn't like the object pronoun him. So he jokingly signed his emails with he, I, mine.
It's a joke that masks a deeper discomfort. Jeffrey is hiding his resistance to shifting social norms behind grammatical pedantry. But Miri has no patience for any of this. She's completely exasperated by both of them, and she looks at her father and flat out calls him an angry white male.
Now, Tom's internal reaction to this is fascinating. He doesn't blow up. He defends himself with logic. He says, how come you never hear me raise my voice? If I'm so angry, explain that. How come I'm always the mildest mannered guy in the room?
That line is the key to Tom's entire character. His anger isn't explosive. He isn't screaming at town hall meetings. His anger is a quiet, stubborn, internal resistance to a culture he feels is actively trying to make him obsolete. He feels like he's being told he's the villain simply for existing as a middle-aged corporate guy.
And this cultural friction doesn't just stay at summer parties, it detonates his professional life. Tom is a high-powered corporate lawyer in Manhattan, and right at this moment, he gets heavily involved in a massive, ripped-from-the-headlines NBA scandal.
The Terry Kirkland scandal. Terry Kirkland is a fictional character in the novel, the majority owner of the Denver Nuggets. A massive investigative piece breaks in Sports Illustrated, alleging that Kirkland has spent the last 2 decades creating a deeply toxic, hostile work environment for women and minorities in the front office.
It's a full-blown PR nightmare for the league. So the NBA hires an outside law firm to conduct an independent investigation, and they bring Tom in as a senior consultant because his absolute specialty is corporate governance. And this is where Tom's fatal flaw reveals itself.
Tom approaches this highly volatile, emotionally charged public scandal as a pure, sterile, legal, and intellectual exercise.
He is looking at fiduciary duty, he is looking at precedent, he applies existing case law, balances the financial equations, and signs his name to a report that recommends the NBA fine Kirkland $15 million and suspend him for 1 year.
Which, in Tom's legal mind, is a severe and unprecedented punishment based on historical corporate case law. But he completely misreads the room. The public backlash to that recommendation is atomic. The players, the media, and the public feel the punishment is a slap on the wrist, a prime example of the billionaire old boys club protecting its own.
The public relations fallout is described as disastrous. Because Tom's name is heavily featured on the report, his law firm panics. They essentially force Tom into taking an early sabbatical. It's a polite corporate execution. They want him to pack his desk and hide out until the news cycle moves on.
Tom attempts to discuss this with his son Michael while they are out shooting hoops at a local park. And the generational chasm here is staggering. Tom tries to explain the nuances of the law, how he was just applying the rules as they're written.
But Michael, armed with his Kantian ethics and his progressive worldview, tells his father flat out that he is on the wrong side of history.
Michael tells Tom, I don't think you understand the opportunity here. You're still thinking about all this as if what we need are slight adjustments you haven't understood the moment. This is a chance for a complete reset.
It perfectly encapsulates the divide. Michael represents a generation demanding systemic overhaul, willing to burn the old structures down. Tom represents an establishment that genuinely believes in precedent, incremental rules, and slight adjustments.
So what does this all mean for Tom? Think about the timing. Precisely at the moment his 12-year marital pact is finally up, the moment Miri is packed for college, his career is abruptly put on ice. He tells Michael when Miri goes, we're free agents.
Tom has been permanently benched in every aspect of his life. He has no office to go to on Monday morning, his kids are gone, and he is finally ready to walk away from his C- marriage. The board has been cleared.
Which sets the stage for what is arguably the most quintessential American response to an existential crisis hitting the highway.
Yes, The Great American Road Trip. It's the second half of the novel, and it is a masterpiece of melancholy. Tom and Amy pack Miriam into the car. They drive her to Pittsburgh, they move her into her Carnegie Mellon dorm, and they say their goodbyes. But when it's time to leave, Tom doesn't get back in the passenger seat to drive home to New York with Amy. He puts her on a plane back to the empty house alone. He gets in his car, and he just keeps driving west.
He becomes a ghost, haunting his own timeline. He sets out to revisit the ghosts of his past to see if there's any other way he could have lived his life.
It's a desperate attempt to outrun his present reality by chasing down the what-ifs. Tom maps out 4 highly specific, deeply revealing stops on this journey across the country. And each stop acts as a mirror reflecting a different version of failure or isolation.
Let's track this route. Stop number 1 is right there in Pittsburgh, right after he drops Miri off. Tom decides to crash with his old college roommate, Sam Tierney. Now, back in grad school, Sam was the quirky intellectual. He was the guy who sat around in a floral Liberty of London bathrobe, drinking Ovaltine and having deep thoughts. Today, he's a tenured English professor at a local university.
But when Tom arrives, he finds that Sam's life is a terrifying portrait of stagnation. Sam lives entirely alone in this massive, gloomy Victorian house that he inherited from his father. The text makes a point to show that Sam never really decorated it. He's just existing among his dead parents' furniture. It feels like he never fully inhabited his own life. He's just renting space in it.
And the atmosphere when Tom visits is painfully awkward. Sam actually has a girlfriend over. She's a PhD student named Deborah Linden, and she is studying thing theory.
Which is such a brilliant, ironic detail. Thing theory is an actual branch of critical theory that examines how inanimate objects shape human behavior, how things assert their presence when they break or interrupt our lives. Sam is dating a woman who studies objects while his own life is essentially broken, and he treats human connection with this sterile, detached awkwardness.
The dinner vibe is incredibly formal and strained. But what really depresses Tom is Sam's absolute fatalism. Later that night, Sam essentially confesses that he believes it's only a matter of time before his career is over.
Sam tells Tom, "I'm a middle-aged white man who likes to teach dead white men." He fully expects that he will eventually say something politically incorrect in class, a student will complain, and the university will fire him to avoid a PR headache. But he isn't fighting it. He isn't angry. Sam has just surrendered. He's enjoying the paycheck while it lasts, but there is absolutely zero forward momentum in his life.
He's a dead man, walking in his own career. It's a deeply depressing start to the road trip. It proves that staying in the academic bubble didn't lead to enlightenment. It just led to a gloomy house and paranoia. So Tom gets back in his car, hits the highway, and drives to South Bend, Indiana. Stop number 2, his younger brother, Eric.
Eric provides a completely different model of how to handle life. Eric's backstory is fascinating. Growing up, Eric was the classic mama's boy. He was overweight, he was whiny, he lacked confidence. But in adolescence, Eric executed a complete, aggressive reinvention of himself. He lost a massive amount of weight, he started doing local theater acting to build charisma, and he even pushed their secular mother into joining a strict Catholic church, completely adopting the religion as his new core identity.
He took total, absolute control of his narrative. He became a new person. But where did all that aggressive reinvention lead him? When Tom arrives in South Bend, he finds Eric living as a divorced dad in a sterile, depressing hotel-like apartment. Because Eric and his ex-wife are deeply Catholic, she won't grant him a legal divorce, so they are stuck in this permanent, agonizing separation. He only gets to see his 3 daughters on Wednesdays and every other weekend.
The highlight, or rather the lowlight of this visit, is when Tom takes Eric out for a drink to a local place called Kelly's Pub. It is an agonizing scene to read. They are playing pool with a local woman named Sharon, and Eric is desperately, almost aggressively flirting with her. He is trying so hard to be funny, to be charming, to project this theater kid energy, but you can feel the needy, desperate loneliness just pouring off of him.
Markovits gives Eric this detail that just breaks your heart. He describes Eric as having this sweet, unhappy laugh. He's laughing loudly, but it sounds like a cry for help. Later that night, back at the depressing apartment, the facade drops. Eric breaks down and confesses to Tom, "I just miss having a woman in my life. I miss having somebody to be nice to."
I want to pause here and extract the brutal midlife insight Markovits is offering. Eric represents the failure of reinvention. You can change your body, you can change your religion, you can change your entire personality, but if you don't fix the internal foundation, you don't cure the underlying loneliness. You just build a new house that you still have to live inside.
And for Tom, observing this is terrifying. Tom is actively contemplating leaving Amy. He's looking at Eric and thinking, is this what awaits me? If I leave the C- marriage, do I end up in a depressing pub on a Monday night, begging a stranger for a scrap of attention, living in an empty apartment, waiting for my kids to text me back?
The reinvention didn't save Eric, it isolated him. So thoroughly spooked, Tom flees South Bend. He drives through the plains and hits the mountains. Stop. Number 3, Denver, Colorado. He goes to visit his old Pomona College basketball teammate, Brian Palmetto. Now, Brian is the guy Tom actually consulted regarding the Terry Kirkland NBA scandal. And because of the massive public fallout from that investigation, Brian has actually been fired from his executive job in the Nuggets organization.
Brian's situation is the inverse of Eric's when it comes to material success. Brian is wildly rich. He lives in a sprawling Cherry Hills mansion with a private tennis court. He drives a Tesla Model X. But internally, he is equally, if not more, miserable. He sarcastically refers to himself as a house husband now. He spends his days hiding out in his luxurious game room, drinking endless bottles of Michelob Ultra, trying to numb his reality.
And he is entirely disconnected from his family. Brian tells Tom that his teenage son looks at him like he is disgusting if Brian even tries to make a joke about girls or dating. But the real meat of this Denver stop the scene that really distills Brian's character happens on the basketball court. Tom and Brian drive down to Lawson Park in 5 Points to play some pickup ball. And as they are shooting around, Brian completely unloads his immense toxic bitterness about his firing and the current state of the league.
Now, remembering our commitment to neutral reporting on these themes, Markovits uses Brian as a profound character study of a displaced man drowning in resentment. Brian feels that as an older white executive in the modern NBA infrastructure, he was made a convenient scapegoat for the Kirkland scandal. He starts ranting to Tom about the European players dominating the league. He cites guys like Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic, and Brian argues that these European guys succeed because they don't carry the cultural historical baggage of American white players. Brian claims that American white players face systemic bias in the league today, that they are assumed to be unathletic or problematic by default.
Brian literally stands on the court and says, if you're a white kid in America, the hill is just too big to climb. He feels entirely marginalized, erased from a basketball culture that he devoted his entire life to building. And Tom doesn't argue with him. Tom just absorbs this. He watches his old friend, a guy who used to be the golden boy on their college campus, an elite athlete just drowning in resentment and light beer.
It's another massive dead end for Tom. Sam is paralyzed by fear. Eric is crushed by loneliness. Brian is consumed by toxic bitterness. None of these men have figured it out. None of them represent an escape hatch, which leads Tom to the final and psychologically most dangerous stop on the road trip, stop number 4, Nevada. He goes to see Jill, the ultimate what-if girl.
Jill was Tom's serious college girlfriend. They were together for 3.5 years at Pomona. She was sharp, capable, and unlike Tom, she bypassed the traditional expected life path entirely. She didn't marry a wealthy person. In fact, she didn't get married at all. When she turned 40, she decided she wanted a child, so she went to a sperm bank and had her daughter Katie completely on her own. She built a career working in local community affairs and politics in Las Vegas.
For Tom, Jill represents the purest fantasy of the road not taken. What if he hadn't gone to law school in New York? What if he hadn't married Amy Naftali and entered that Wellfleet world? What if he had just stayed out west with Jill? He is so consumed by this fantasy that when he arrives at her house, he is too nervous to knock. He literally sleeps in his car on the street outside her house before finally approaching the door the next morning.
And when she opens the door, Jill is completely baffled. She hasn't seen him in decades. She asks, "What the hell are you doing here?" But because she is gracious, she lets him stay in the guest room. And that night, she hosts a dinner party with some of her local Vegas friends, including a guy named Daryl who works the sports desk at the local paper.
And it is at this dinner party that Tom's fantasy is completely and violently shattered.
Exactly. He sits at this table, drinking wine, listening to Jill and her friends talk. And they are speaking in the shorthand of deep, long-term friendship. They are sharing inside jokes, debating local Vegas politics, referencing past vacations. They are living a rich, complex, fully established life that has absolutely nothing to do with Tom Layward. He realizes with a sickening thud that he can't just parachute into someone else's timeline.
He has this terrifying internal monologue. He thinks to himself, what if I actually did this? What if I left Amy, moved to Nevada, and tried to integrate into Jill's life? He realizes that the last 30 years of his life, his entire marriage to Amy, the raising of Miri and Michael, his career, would just be treated by Jill and her friends as interruption. A 30-year detour before he finally got back to the real path. The thought fills him with absolute horror. It proves to him that you cannot unlive your own history. The people you walked away from in your 20s didn't just freeze in amber waiting for you to return. They built entire universes without you.
It's a profound moment of clarity. The fantasy of escape is officially dead. Tom realizes that tearing down his life won't magically transport him to a better, more authentic one. It will just leave him standing alone in the rubble of the only life he actually has. So think about that. Have you ever looked up an old ex on Instagram late at night? Have you ever sat at your desk and wondered what would have happened if you took that other job in that other city 10 years ago? The illusion is always that the other life is perfect. The reality is it's just a different set of problems, a different set of compromises, and the brutal truth is you wouldn't even belong there anymore. The you that would have fit into that life doesn't exist.
Which brings Tom to the final leg of his physical and spiritual journey. And this brings us to the climax of the story: mortality and the choice to endure.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because while Tom has been having all these emotional revelations across the country, his physical body has been quietly, steadily breaking down. It started subtly back in New York, but on the road it's escalating.
Markovits maps out the physical symptoms with clinical precision. In the mornings, Tom wakes up and his hands are swollen heavy with retained fluid. If he presses his fingers against his eyes, they leak like wet sponges. He gets breathlessly tired walking short distances. When he was in South Bend, he actually mentioned this to his brother Eric. He said the doctors ran tests but couldn't find anything specifically wrong. They joked that he's just suffering from the terminal condition of being middle-aged.
But it's more than just aging. It's as if the heavy tread of his life, the weight of his secrets, and his isolation is literally crushing his heart. So after leaving Nevada, he arrives at his final destination, Los Angeles, to see his son Michael. He meets Michael's girlfriend Betty, the woman with the hinterland. Betty happens to be house-sitting a beautiful property up in the Palisades. And one afternoon, Michael has to go to the university to teach, leaving Tom and Betty alone to hang out. They decide to take a walk down to the beach.
And to get from the beach back up to the top of the Palisades, you have to walk up these incredibly steep, towering wooden stairs cut directly into the hillside. It's a massive physical exertion. And as Tom is walking up these stairs following Betty, his heart simply gives out.
It is a terrifying, visceral sequence. His chest seizes, he literally cannot draw enough oxygen, he has to collapse onto a wooden bench on the landing. And to keep himself from spiraling into a full-blown panic attack, to literally keep his mind tethered to reality while his cardiovascular system is failing, he starts doing these frantic mental exercises. He starts reciting poetry that he memorized back in high school. He mutters Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven to himself, Once Upon a Midnight Dreary. He recites Robert Frost. He recites Percy Bysshe Shelley's Ozymandias, the ultimate poem about the decay of great empires.
And returning to that vital basketball motif we discussed at the beginning, he visualizes famous immortal sports moments. He pictures Michael Jordan in midair against the Lakers, switching the basketball from his right hand to his left hand to avoid a block. Yeah. He pictures the legendary coach Jimmy Valvano running wildly, joyously onto the court after NC State won the 1983 national championship, desperately looking for someone to hug.
It is so beautiful and so tragic. Here's a man facing the very real possibility of his own death on a wooden staircase, and he is clinging to these specific fragments of human excellence, of poetry and athletic grace, just to remind himself that he is alive. He survives the stairs, but he ends up in the hospital. His condition is severe. And this hospital room becomes the crucible where the 12-year emotional arc of the book finally snaps shut. Because while Tom was driving across the country, he had been ignoring Amy's frantic phone calls. But eventually they connected.
The phone calls between Tom and Amy while he was on the road are absolute masterpieces of suppressed emotion. When they finally speak, Amy is furious. She's enraged that he drove off without a word. But just beneath the thin ice of that anger is pure, unadulterated terror. She tells him, "I don't want you to die before we make up." And she admits something profound. She admits that for years she was angry and difficult precisely because she intuitively knew he was waiting to leave her. She could feel his withdrawal, and it terrified her.
And so when Tom is lying in that hospital dead in Los Angeles, weak and compromised, who walks through the door? Amy. She immediately booked a flight and flew across the country the second she heard he was sick. Michael is in the room standing awkwardly by Tom's wheelchair. And Markovits writes this incredibly poignant, subtle moment. Amy walks in, she unpacks her suitcase, she freshens up in the little bathroom, and then she walks over to her son and says, "I can push him. I've always wanted to push him around." And she physically takes the handles of the wheelchair from Michael.
It is a profound symbolic transfer of care. In that single gesture, Amy is reclaiming her role as his primary partner. Flaws, affairs, resentments, and all. She is saying, "This is my husband. I will take the burden."
And then comes the ending. The kids leave the room. They're finally alone. Amy looks at Tom. Miri is successfully installed in college. Michael is living his own life. The 12-year pact, the timer Tom set in his head all those years ago, has officially expired. The cage door is open. Amy looks at him and asks, "What do you want to do now?" We're in LA. The kids are all grown up. She is offering him the out.
And Tom looks at her and he simply says, "Let's go home."
Let's go home. When I read those 3 words, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is vital to understand that this is not a fairy tale ending. There is no soaring romantic music swelling in the background. Tom and Amy have not magically solved their problems. The C- marriage is still objectively a C- marriage. The memory of Zach Zersky's open linen shirts still exists. The friction of the Wellfleet house still exists. The fundamental differences in how they view the world remain entirely intact.
But Tom has changed. He has looked out at the vast, lonely expanse of the American highway. He has seen the alternatives. He has witnessed Sam's intellectual paralysis, Eric's desperate, suffocating loneliness, Brian's toxic, isolated bitterness and Jill's closed-off past, he has seen what the fresh start actually looks like.
He realizes that the accumulated data of his marriage, the shared history, the inside jokes, the years of raising Miri and Michael, the simple, undeniable fact that Amy flew across the continent without hesitation to push his wheelchair, that data is worth more than the void. He chooses the beautifully imperfect, sometimes miserable, but entirely real life he has already built over the sterile fantasy of starting over.
It is an acknowledgement that enduring a flawed relationship, committing to the shared history you've written with someone, might actually be the bravest choice available in middle age. It is a total rejection of the modern consumerist impulse to constantly discard what is broken and seek a shiny new upgrade.
The novel challenges the very core premise of the midlife crisis. It suggests that the overwhelming desire to blow up your life, to buy the sports car, to have the affair, to run away to Nevada, is often just a cowardly distraction from the much harder, much quieter work of accepting the life you actually have.
So what does this all mean? Today, we unpacked a marriage that survived on the absolute brink for over a decade. We navigated the shifting cultural landscapes and grammatical battlegrounds of modern America. We looked at the agonizing transition of the empty nest and the stark, unavoidable realities of our own failing bodies. Tom Layward thought he was waiting 12 years to execute a grand escape plan, only to discover upon surviving a failing heart that those 12 years of waiting were, in fact, his life.
It's a reminder that we don't get to live in the what-ifs. We only get to live in the what-ifs.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. We live in a culture that constantly bombards us with the message to never settle. We are obsessed with personal optimization, with endless upgrades, with finding our best selves and curating the perfect aesthetic existence. But what if that is all a trap? What is the hidden profound value in just staying? Is it possible that in a world obsessed with tearing things down, the greatest, most radical act of rebellion in midlife isn't running away, but finding the grace and the courage to accept the beautifully imperfect, deeply flawed C- life you've already built?
Powerful question to carry with you.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you take these questions and the incredible weight of this story out into your own world. See you next time.